Wow, we have really got to change this intro music for Neha. This does not make any sense at all. So I'm back today. We are. I don't know about you. On the edge of my seat. Neha is taking us through an incredible story. It's absolutely incredible. Neha, I'm really blessed and honored that you are telling us this story today. So we're going to get going and get right back into it. For the CXN experience, I'm Grad Khan, and here we go. I want to tie this together with sort of our theories of how the world works, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and because I think a lot of people over time come to some conclusion that there's something going on. Like some people call it the Matrix, some people call it God, some people have, there's all sorts of different explanations. But I think ultimately it just seems like there's something happening. But both my daughters,
Mm-hmm.
when they turned 5, they could ask for anything they wanted. And
Mm-hmm.
it was pretty cool. I say, and what a 5-year-old wants is usually like they never ask for Ferraris and stuff like that. So it was a very manageable request. But they didn't feel like there were any restrictions. And so
Uh-huh.
my oldest daughter, when she turned 5, she wanted to go to New York. She wanted to see Bernadette Peters on Broadway in Annie
Mm-hmm.
Get Your Gun, which ironically, about 7 years later, my oldest daughter ended up being in that show
Wow.
at Massey
Mm-hmm.
Hall in Toronto with Louise Petrie, and Billy Ray Cyrus, by
Great.
the way.
Oh.
So it's some very funny stories,
Mm-hmm.
especially Miley Cyrus, who was there. Like there's all sorts of stuff I can tell you, but
Wow.
we'll save that for another day.
I need
So
to meet your daughter.
oh yeah, she's so cool. She's so much cooler than I am. It's not even funny. Most people assume she's been adopted. She's not. We're in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally accidentally, this is just my own stupidity, booked this trip the weekend or the week in the weekend of the New York Marathon.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so it's Sunday, which is the end of the New York Marathon, and so we're stuck in the middle of this insane million plus crowd of people, and and my daughter and I are trying to get back to Toronto, and we couldn't find a taxi, and we couldn't get out, and I was carrying her on my shoulders, and it was pretty crazy, and so
Mm-hmm.
we go into St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not super religious, as you probably know, but we went into St. Patrick's Cathedral. It's a gorgeous piece of architecture, and I wanted to show it to her because I was showing her New York. She'd never been to New York before. And we stayed at the Waldorf Astoria, and we went to
Wow.
Broadway, and we'd seen all these shows. It was an amazing experience and very
Nice.
life changing. And of course, she ended up being a music director on Broadway, so it was a very
Great.
prescient move too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so in St. Patrick's, and we I just said, in a very unusual move for me, I
Mm-hmm.
decided to pray for a taxi because I didn't know how we are going to get to the airport because you couldn't get a taxi. There were no taxis available because there was like a
Wow.
million people on this run, right? And she prayed for a taxi as well in St. Patrick's. So we go back to the Waldorf. We get to the Waldorf, and we're staying in the Waldorf Towers. And lo and behold, a taxi shows up that's available to take us to
Wow.
the airport. Yeah. Now, hold on a second. Then another taxi shows up right behind it, also available to go to the airport. And
Sweet.
like literally, we'd spent the entire day trying to find a taxi and hadn't been able to find a taxi, right?
Well, you
And
should have just prayed earlier.
I turned to Myrna and I said,
Uh-huh.
"Wow, that's so weird. 2 taxis." And she looked at me very like nonchalant, very much in a child's view of the world. And she goes, "Well, Dad, we both prayed for taxis, so we each got one,"
Wow. Yeah.
which is awesome.
It's
Anyway,
like, of
so
course, two of us
of
and two
course, right?
taxis.
And
Yeah.
and so, but to your story too, it's
Yeah.
like how do you interpret the sort of the forces at play that caused all that to happen? Like how do you think about like the universe, the matrix, like what's your thinking? Is that coincidence and just random, or do you feel like somehow the universe is providing and giving you things when you need them? I'd love to hear your philosophy on that because it's to me it's a very interesting part of what people think.
Yeah, no, and my life, just because of all the experiences I've had, I've, been forced to go from someone who completely believed to becoming a non-believer completely, to then it's been this journey for me to kind of have like my faith restored in a way, instead of
Interesting.
for faith in this universal consciousness, not in a person or a thing, but that force is very prevalent in my life. Like, how do you account for all the people that John Kaplan knows? He picks Raji to send this audio to, you
Right.
know, and
I
like
know. I know. It's so crazy, right?
of all the
It's so
places,
crazy.
it's crazy. And of all the places that Raji would go to spend 5 days, someone who doesn't have any time, he chooses to
I've
come to
never
my
known him to spend
workshop.
5 minutes on anything. I don't understand when 5 days. He really did a 5 day retreat.
He did a 5 day retreat.
How did
And
he sneak that in? Because I don't even remember. I don't remember him being gone for 5 seconds. Like, how did
maybe
that? Is there like a Raji robot? Is there another Raji? Just come. You
doppelganger.
can tell me. Is there a twin? There's a twin, right? Because
Probably.
there's something going on there. Because it's way too
I
much.
guess so. Somebody that we don't know. Maybe his doppelganger or something, like
Your
someone that goes
doppelganger.
to the retreats or fill in for him when he's doing all of that stuff.
Wow, that's amazing. So you're
Yeah.
so in there, like in classic story structure. There's a
Yeah.
great book called Story,
Mm-hmm.
which is like the sort of how stories are created. Basically, the way a story starts is that it starts with stasis, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
you ever seen the movie Gravity?
No, I
Like
haven't. I
the
should watch it.
no, oh my
Mm-hmm.
God, it's such a good movie. But it's kind of a classic sort of version of this. So basically the stasis is there a bunch of astronauts and they're in the space shuttle and they're repairing a satellite, just kind of like
Mm-hmm.
yum dum dum, just kind of normal moon mission. And then there's an inciting incident. And so the
Mm-hmm.
inciting incident is that a pile of space debris comes along and destroys the satellite and the space shuttle.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, and it's quite a dramatic scene because it's
Like they all survived.
well, no, not they don't all survive. So, and Sandra Bullock and George Clooney survive,
Okay,
and
I
then
have
everyone else
seen
gets
Gravity. I take that back. I thought this
okay.
was like some old Gravity you're
All
talking
right.
about. Yes, I have
Yeah,
seen that.
so
Yes.
Sandra Bullock and
Uh-huh.
George Clooney survive. So, but basically, then it's essentially they go from they go back to their space shuttle. It's destroyed.
Uh-huh.
Then they go to the Russian station, but it's like or do they go to the International Space Station? I can't remember. I think it's the International Space Station, but it's like disintegrating. And then they go to the Chinese space station, which doesn't even really exist, but they go there. And and along the way, George Clooney like loses it too. I hope I'm not ruining this for anyone, but the movie was
He saves
2013, so you're
her.
just gonna have to sort of yeah.
Yeah.
And then but basically there's this. It's what's called a hero's journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
Sandra Bullock is the hero of the story, and essentially what we're doing is that she has to overcome obstacles after the inciting incident to try to return to stasis. And then she successfully returns to Earth and survives. And
Mm-hmm.
in stasis is she's back to normal, right? So she could go back home and sleep in her bed and blah blah blah. But it's a new normal, and that she's not in space anymore. Gravity is one of the most perfectly constructed movies from a story standpoint. And so as I think about your story, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
had this like sort of life where you were very, very spiritual. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to put words in your mouth. So correct me if I'm saying it the wrong way, but you're very spiritual and spending a
Protected.
lot of
Yep.
time on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you
Mm-hmm.
had an inciting incident, which was the spirituality wasn't what you thought it was, right? So you there the it was a false spirituality. So you lost faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you had a hero's journey of some kind as you found your way back to spirituality, right? And then you're at a new type of spirituality. It's not the same as one you had before, I suspect, but
Mm-hmm.
there's something there that's the same kind. So talk to me a little bit about your hero's journey. Like what were the obstacles that you had to overcome? Somehow you got from India to where do you live now?
Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay, that's a big. So Charlotte, North Carolina was a long way from India. So somehow you made it from
Yeah.
India to Charlotte, North Carolina. Like all that sort of happened. So what was your journey to make that happen? And what were the obstacles you overcame as sort of the hero on this journey to kind of recover your spirituality?
So what that incident did was it was like a disruptor, right? It
Hmm.
completely shattered any
Classic inciting
concept.
incident. Yeah.
Yeah, like any concept of spirituality, God, believe in people, everything, right? So the kind of person I am, I do everything with intensity. So I went from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. And the
Right.
most, I think there were two, three things that really kind of like accentuated it because I couldn't tell anybody in my house, right? Like this would
Oh,
have kind of
interesting.
like been a big issue at that time. And the reason why I'm comfortable talking about it is because my mom's no more, so it's like I'm not so connected to my
I'm
family anymore.
sorry.
So, but what it did was the worst thing that happened to me through that was I lost faith in my own ability that I can judge who to trust and who not, you know?
Interesting.
And
Interesting.
that
Wow,
was
that's tough.
that was, I think, the most fundamental like thing that for the next 7 years it was all kind of like the after effects of that. I never got any counseling because I never told anybody. I never had, and like I came back and it was a full pivot. I went from being like 4 hours of spiritual practice to nothing and
Hmm.
went directly to college, right? Like as if nothing had happened. And I just brushed it under the carpet. And, things kept building up. And I didn't realize until I became like a facilitator for meditation stuff where I now actually do workshops for people who have a lot of trauma. I had complex PTSD. And that then sort of showed up in every relationship that I had ever since till about say 2000 like 7, right? This thing happened in like 2004 until 2007 like everything was downhill. And I got to a point where I was drinking half a bottle of vodka to sleep because nothing else would get me to sleep.
Wow.
And
These are great obstacles. Wow, this is a real hero's journey. Wow.
I think it's a little too intense. I was telling you, like, it has a lot of twists and turns. But when I hit that rock bottom, like, I developed inflammation in my pancreas. Yeah. And I would be getting excruciating pain in my pancreas. I would have to call the ambulance. I was in my job by that time. And then I remember this flight I was on from, it was from Hong Kong back to India. And I don't know which, I was reading a book and I just had this moment. I was like, you know what? I can't do this anymore. Like, if this is
Wow.
life, I just can't do this anymore. And it was not just that thing that had happened with the guru, but similar things had happened like two or three more times. And I was like, I can't do this. Like, this is rock bottom, like a bad breakup and, things that happen. And I remember that's when I kind of like I remember coming home and I saw this banner in my apartment complex which said breathing and meditation. And I was like, this is happening. It was happening on the floor below mine. So if it was going to happen in some distant location, I wouldn't have felt comfortable going, but
Hmm.
it was in
Hmm.
my building. And that's when I walked into this workshop where they were teaching these tools. And I remember the first day walking in, and I was like, you know what? I'm not bowing down in front of any guru.
Hmm.
I'm not into that. Like, you physics teachers teach you physics, and you don't bow down to them. So I'm so grateful for that teacher who was just so patient with me. She was like, just finish this. And I remember at the end of that 4-day workshop was the first time in years I slept without drinking. And
Wow.
I
That's
haven't,
great. What a story.
yeah, and I haven't ever had that pancreas pain. That's just gone. And So initially, like it wasn't like I believed in it right off the bat. Like I was like, okay, great. It took me about some years to be like, okay, this is legit. You know what? Like, so there was a journey there too, but I started doing the breath work as medication. I would stick to it as medication. And I remember my father came to visit me after like 5, 6 months of that. And he's like, your face looks different. Like there's something different about you.
Hmm.
And and yeah, and so like the first few months, it impacted my health. A few more months, and I was like, okay, I'm in the same job. The same things have still happened in my life. But now I'm not crying and getting hospitalized. But now I'm actually
Right.
rejoicing. I'm switching the lights off and dancing to my favorite song, you know? So this is amazing. And then I started to look into more advanced breathwork stuff and meditation stuff. And sure enough, like the long term, after about 2, 3 years, I had this moment where I realized that usually someone would say something like in India, you know, there's a lot of gender disparity when you come at in terms of work. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to move
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
If somebody would say something at work, I would rush to the loo and be crying, you know? And this thing happened, like a guy made a very nasty comment, which would have gotten me to rush to the washroom. But now I was like, yeah, whatever, you know? And I was like, holy cow, what just happened? Like, I'm not crying and this isn't affecting me. So it had made me more resilient. And I remember very clearly that was the day I was like, you know, I wish somebody had taught me this. You know,
Hmm.
somebody had told me that just by breathing, you can be stronger inside. Like you can learn how to manage your emotions. And that's when I decided to kind of like become like a facilitator. And it's been such a rewarding journey. Like the more I learn, the less I know. And
Hmm.
that's when my parents were like, you have to get married, typical Indian. In complex PTSD, what happens, Brad, is that there are layers, right? So there was a lot of healing and I wasn't getting triggered so much, but there was some deeper PTSD was still there. And I remember not being ready for marriage. And dad was like, what the hell is going on? Like, you need to get married. Like, that's the Indian culture, right? My dad's very forward thinking in the way that he never sort of discriminated between his girl children and his male, sort of boy, between the kind of education we got. But he was very clear that I don't care what job you have and what career you have, you need to get married. That's my responsibility. So I remember not being ready for it, but then I decided, I was like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? I'll get a divorce. And so I got married in like 2010 and I moved to the US after I got married because I'd come here as an exchange student a few years earlier. And so that was when I got a little bit more deeply ingrained in the facilitator track. I went to business school. And then it turns out that I got married to someone who had other preferences, so to speak.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my God. It's a country song. My God, it's a country song.
So I
Oh
told
my God.
you.
Other preferences. Well played, actually. Well played. I got a tip of the hat to that one. Holy smokes, that's incredible. See, so let me can I jump in for a second? So I just gotta give you I gotta give you a break for a second. This is super intense. I gotta towel off or something. This is just extraordinary. And Neha, thank you so much. This is just
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
openness that you're giving us here. It's really helpful because it really helps other people that are on journeys identify and connect. So that's it for today. We're going to come back with Neha tomorrow and we'll kind of conclude this sort of three-part series and we'll dig into brain science and a bunch of other things. But for the CXM experience, I'm Grad Khan and I'll see you next time.